in Africa in terms of the use of private companies to exploit primarily the black population of African nations. In Eastern Africa right now, in the sort of Horn of Africa, you have what has essentially become the front line for AFRICOM right now, based out of Djibouti. And you have U.S. involvement in the Ethiopian-Eritrean conflict, as well as ongoing in Somalia. In the situation in the Congo, you have U.S. mercenary companies that are working. AFRICOM, I think, is unfortunately neocolonialism. And I think that it's a very disturbing development that Obama is seeking to expand the presence of the U.S. military on the African continent. And I think this is something that's been subject of great discussion and debate in the halls of legislatures in African nations, particularly in South Africa, where the Parliament of South Africa actually voted to try to ban any mercenary companies from operating out of South Africa. So you have the overt U.S. military presence that I think is going to be expanding, and then you have the sort of hidden war, which is the fact that these private companies are deploying throughout Africa. Blackwater actually is present in Kenya right now, and you have many mercenary companies that are descending on the Congo. So it's an incredibly important issue. And on October 27th, there's going to be an event in D.C. sponsored by the Center for Constitutional Rights, addressing the mercenary companies and their role in Africa. And you can look at the CCR Justice website for information on that. Dave?
Congresswoman Betty McCollum's ACORN Act, have you seen this?
No.
This is a bill where ACORN means against corporations organizing to rip off the nation. It would defund any government contractor that's being convicted of felonies. So it wouldn't defund ACORN, but it would defund those who've taken thousands of times. So, so there's a good one.
Right, and also Senator Sanders introduced an amendment to the defense authorization earlier this week that's written in very, very powerful language to try to do essentially that.
To do a study of whether to do that. But Betty McCollum says...
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I think that what you described there is what should be done. I mean, I think that's the point. Go ahead, Matt.
What, if any, role is organized labor playing among the military contractor organizations? Because you're talking about an underclass, and people from different nations who may not have labor rights. I've heard personal accounts of concerns and abuses about the working conditions for those contractors.
Oh, the working conditions are atrocious. Well, I was just with the new head of this AFL-CIO in Pittsburgh. Quite by accident, I got invited to do an event with Trumka when he was addressing the steelworkers, and I raised that issue with them and said that because the steelworkers now have hired a great labor organizer named Charlie Kernigan, who's going to be working on their sort of international work, international outreach. I don't think that it's on the radar right now of the big labor unions in this country, and it absolutely should be. Because ultimately what you have here is a system that sends both U.S. workers and foreign workers to the bottom of the wage scale, on the one hand, and then secondly you have a scam where U.S. taxpayers are being ripped off because we're having to provide insurance to these contractors that companies like AIG benefit off of through something called the Defense Base Act. But organized labor, unfortunately, the large unions, they haven't taken on this issue with the exception of some one-off battles having to do with Iraqi oil workers. The point you're making, I think, is a good one, and I hope that the labor unions do address the anti-laborer aspect of the war contracting system. Yeah. Go ahead.
Two quick questions. When Jay Leno said to you on the Bill Maher show, "How are you still alive?" Like, what was your thoughts going through your head?
My thought was my mom is watching the show, and I mean, yeah. I've been asked that before, but I don't, I don't pay that stuff any mind. I mean, even if I thought something was going to happen to me, and what are you going to do about it? So you can have the paralysis of analysis. But yeah, when Jay Leno said that, I was thinking, shit, my mother's watching. And because it's scary for a mom to hear that. Anyway, that's exactly what I was thinking. And
are you going to change the name of your book to Z spelled with an S?
You're so last week, man. It's not even Z anymore. Now Blackwater's changed its name to the U.S. Training Center.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, that's their official name. They're now the U.S. Training Center.
Where is
it's like there's no more Z. Oh, they have a way. If you just Google U.S. Training Center.
I mean, globally, do they call it that? The U.S. Training Center?
They have 15 different iterations, at least, around the world. They're Paravant, Greystone, Blackwater. They have a million different names, but the official name of the company now with the U.S. government is U.S. Training Center.
I have two questions. The short one is, you say there's like 74,000 private contractors. And how do you know that there's not even many more than that? Where do you get that figure?
Well, if you recall what I said, I was saying that doesn't even count the ones that work for the State Department or others. It also doesn't count those that work for actual private companies that hire these contractors. What I said very clearly was that there are 74,000 that are registered on the Department of Defense payroll. I think that there are many, many more than that. The Afghan government, I think, has 20,000 private contractors on its payroll, and its payroll is from U.S. taxpayers anyway. I mean, it's quite likely well over 100,000.
So is it even getting to the point where you can't even keep track anymore? I mean,
yeah, I mean, all the numbers that I tend to try to cite the most conservative numbers because I think it's more credible to start from a position that actually is backed up by official statistics. But I do think that it's very hard to keep track of it. I mean, there are a handful of auditors monitoring 600, literally a handful of auditors monitoring 630 corporations. It's a recipe for outright flagrant unaccountability and criminality in many cases.
so the other question is, I totally agree with you that we live in very scary times right now because of the thousands, tens of thousands of Obama supporters that just want to be passive and, you know, let him do his thing. And I run into that a lot with just friends in my social circles. For example, Coping got involved in this anti-drone action at Nevada Creech Air Force Base last week, and I was there, and I was telling someone at work before I went, you know, about the drones, about the fact that since Obama came into office, we've been using drones and drone attacks many more times than Bush ever did, and the highest civilian casualty. And her response, someone so-called progressive, is, I don't agree with you and I don't want to talk about it. So my question is to you, this is really scary to me that people do not want to hear the truth. This is not about opinion, this is about fact. What do we do to reach to those people and, you know, wake them up? I don't agree.
Well, I mean, I think there are a lot of people in this room that are trying to raise awareness on the very issues that you've talked about and that others have discussed throughout the day here.
But if people are so passive that they don't want the information, they're closed off, they just want to go on with their life. How do we break through that?
Well, I mean, I don't really have an answer to that question. I mean, I think all of us are fighting to try to do just that. I don't think that there is. I think we need to take a humility pill at this point and realize that we're sort of at ground zero with the battle to move forward. I see here I'm having the cane yanking off, so yeah. Thank you very much, everyone, for that.